part 3 of my series on Astral Vampirism. Alrighty, so I had a friend hit me up. Is I guess the channel I chose for these videos. I had people subscribed that haven't in forever. One of my friends unsubscribed. I think they were probably like disturbed. They're probably like thinking, "What the fuck? Have I thought of this guy in all the wrong ways?" And it's like, no. I mean, since I've met you, I've been pretty open about me being a psychic vampire, and in fact the whole thing about feeding on children. One friend of mine DM'd me and they were like, are you just telling me this? And I'm like, no, I've been saying it for years, since I'd had my vampiric awakening, since I was 16 years old, and since I've talked to like psychic vampires from or rather Varmir, since my awakening, that were my age. And when I was 16, I used to know like some Varmir that were a little younger, that had the same type of state of being. And it's weird because in almost every form of vampiric literature, I think even Michelle Bellinger mentions it in the Psychic Vampire Codex, that children just produce an overwhelming amount of psychic energy, vital energy, chi, prana. It's it's interesting because like children are so powerful. Like, I think their power can literally warp reality, and the fact that they're stupid, they're children. Reality altering power, prana, The Shining. Us feeding on chaos, essentially, just unadulterated chaos. I think is, I think it be less focus on us feeding on kids and more so like, I don't know, psychically disciplining your children and teaching them magic. Spiritualism would probably be better, because I'll tell you, like, the Pied Piper, Der Grubman, all these entities across the world that like literally phase into existence and eat children physically. Like all these stories for thousands of years of children just disappearing. And it's always the prelude is always, "Mom and Dad, there's this thing in my closet." "Oh, that's not real, just ignore it." And most of the time they ignore it and it's gone. But like sometimes it just eats them. And these children's fear, it's like a portal, and it allows things to physically enter Midgard and eat the children, right? There are things that eat children. I'm a mosquito that maybe lands on your child. There are things that quite literally Baba Yaga them. So again, I think there's far worse things than a pesky mosquito. But no. And this goes with all psychic vampires because we're born this way. Before my awakening at 16, I had been subconsciously feeding on kids my age throughout my whole life. And I imagine that my mother's pregnancy with me was probably not that good compared to my sister, because I was most certainly feeding on her in the womb. And this is an interesting thing, and it's kind of unfair. But unless psychic vampire or Varmir rather, mother that's pregnant is feeding on other people and making sure that she's feeding, there's this unfortunate tragedy, and it is horrible because I personally know someone, or rather used to know someone, that had gone through this experience. She's a Varmir or psychic vampire, and she got pregnant, and because of her need to feed on prana, and because of the fact that she was basically just pregnant, didn't have family, resources, connections, and was basically left alone, had no one to feed on, she basically unintentionally accidentally aborted her baby. The baby became a stillborn because her pregnancy, in contrast with her vampiric nature, led to the baby passing away, unfortunately. And you can be a female vampire and successfully give birth. But those are things to be aware of, because I've heard stories of women that are like, oh yeah, I realize my nature, and then this happens, and it's such a fucking tragedy. You know, it's like, and oftentimes, if they're not feeding enough, the body can also physically consume the fetus, like it's a foreign entity, and try to physically devour the child, which is a actual medical thing that happens with some women. But if a psychic vampire woman is not feeding properly, it can happen to her. It's whereas for men of our kind, it's less less of a problem. You know, is it, you know, and again, I guess there are sexual sacral vampires, but I don't get that, as I've emphasized in the previous videos. But I've never, like, I have the mentality of eating your food and not fucking your food. So my fiance, the love of my life, I've never fed on her, and I never will. She, even after I revealed my nature, tried to send me a photo of her hand. And I'm like, no, I can't do that. And it's weird too, because she kind of was, even though she's like an atheist, she was like really into it to an extent to where, like, she was like, you know, you gotta dress all sexy with the fangs and the widow's peak. And I'm like, all right, so have you ever been, any of you watching this, have you been in an interracial relationship, or any of you black women? How would you feel if your husband came in with a Klan robe and called you the N-word and was like, I'm gonna pick your cotton out that asshole, girl, you know? Or just you know, like, how many of you are like have like something or whatever where, like, you're Danish, right? And your girl like expects you to, you know, like, just wear horns and like degrade yourself. Or like, if there's like a German couple, or like maybe like a, let's say a Romanian dude, and let's say a German guy ends up with a Romanian woman, and she's like, I need you to you know, wear a swastika armband and fuck me. You know, so you know, just the idea of sexualizing what I am, even for the pleasure of my woman, seems, I told her absolutely not. No, like, that's where I crossed the line. Is like two things I don't like. I don't like being called daddy, because that gives me unpleasant images in my head of my potential future daughter. I'd like that one to be preserved. And the second one is, you know, getting all masqueradey and twilighty. No, absolutely not. No, like, no. I'd rather. There's so many things I'd rather do gay porn than you know, have sex with a beautiful woman dressed as a vampire. That's a hard fucking pass, bro. Absolutely not. Yeah, no. I'm not even sure where I'm going with this video. Oh yeah, so, but yeah, no, I've been honest since, like, what, 2016, 2017 of my nature, and I have friends that are like, now that I'm not afraid of hiding, now that I'm like, you know, I think it's time to be the first person on YouTube to actually publish a series on what actual astral vampirism is, what Varmir are, or I guess psychic vampires. You know, and to actually just like be like, this is actually what it is, and to actually explain the cosmology and science behind it, or spiritual science, which is oxymoron, the spirituality behind it, the magic behind it, the metaphysics, is I just, the amount of bullshit, even from people that think they are vampires, which their content makes me want to die. I'm just like, Yeah, but no, I'm surprised that it really hits people hard when they're like, psychic vampires feed on children. Yeah, psychic vampire children feed on children. We don't feed on old people. And I remember working my job, and a guy comes in with an amulet. He's like 60, 70 years old, has an amulet for protection against astral parasites. And it gave me such a headache and I wanted to die. It was just the moment he came in, I was like, I just wanted, and I'm like, hey, that's that amulet you have. That's that medallion. That's for protecting yourself against vampiric forces, right? And he's like, yeah, actually, how did you know that specifically? Like, one thing to guess it's a protection charm, but another like that specifically. And I'm like, yeah, who made it? And he's like, oh, my girlfriend. And I'm like, you can tell her that it works. And he's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, because I basically feel like my skin is burning in your presence, which is not, and it's a weird irony when it's old people that wear the medallions, because this guy's energy, his vital energy, his prana, it's all Saturnian. It's all death energy. He's on his way out. He smells like he's going to die in like 5 years. And it's like, you are just protected by being senile and old. You don't need that. Your amulet only just offends me for no reason. I already wouldn't want to feed on you because you smell like a rotten egg. And I feel so bad for members of my kind that have to deal with the old people. It's such a pointless irony. It makes no sense to me. It's so unnecessary. If you're in your mid-20s, 30s, whatever, you're young and your grandmother gives you like this medallion, it keeps you away from the leeches. That makes sense. I'm like, okay, that's fair enough. That's a valid reason. But why is it the old people? Why is it the hippies? So I stay away from hippies because oftentimes they have a fucking bag of magic tricks that just makes me want to fucking become bulimic. It works. But yeah, and to also bring up a little bit of the persecution thing, I've tried joining a few occult orders in my state, and the moment it's relayed that I'm a psychic vampire or Varmir is that always gets you kicked out. You can't be I've been kicked out of pagan collective groups, locally. I'm trying to be as vague as possible. But the moment they find out, they're like, you're banned. You're not allowed to show up here. Absolutely not. And again, with Christians, it's interesting because officially within apostolic Christianity, they denounce the vampire as not being real, which is good. Because, if any of my Orthodox or Catholic friends found out about this video series, which I'm sure they will, I just don't care. That can go a lot of different ways, but if anything, they're just thinking I'm possessed, and that's fine. That it's an occult practice. That's also part of the reason I didn't join the Orthodox Church, because I had to denounce the occult, and I was willing to do that. I burned so many grimoires and manifestos, things like that, and the thing is, though, if it's in their language an occult practice, the act of spiritual vampirism, then if it's actually a part of my soul and is a part of God's design, then by the nature of my birth, I was born unworthy of salvation through apostolic tradition. That's an interesting thing to think about. That's funny. It's just funny because I couldn't not be a psychic vampire, and I'll get into what happens when you try not to be, but I'd have to explain the nature of what we are. So I'll be using simple terms like using a bit of reference from Michelle Bellinger's Psychic Vampire Codex, which, despite being cringe, was very useful during my awakening. It was one of the very few bits of content out there that actually addressed the subject with some intellectual honesty. And but there is a problem. She ripped off so much of the Vampire the Masquerade to create her house Capatru, which again, it's she is one of us, but she's not the best. She basically used our existence as a spiritual state of being, as a spiritual species with an extra S, right? And Vampire the Masquerade as an excuse to create a coven, which is just a harem of 40-year-old lesbians, and to see Fang Fag Sebastian, the Fang Smith, and Jackson, what is his name? Jackson something. Just these weird figures that are actually psychic vampires. But it's like, why did you, I complained about the culture in the previous video, but it's, yeah, no, absolutely not. But yeah, I figure, I should start by what is a psychic vampire. Well, psychic vampire, technically, medical term for like a narcissist, emotional abuser, which was originally coined by the Church of Satan, and then taken into the context of what we are. We just kind of appropriated it as a means of trying to make sense of what we are, and then as they, because we're outcasted from everything. When people know what we are, we can be a part of so many different groups, have different friends, under the pretense that our existence remains a secret. So when we're not afraid, we become social outcasts. And there's this mentality of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So they join outcasts that are the gods, that are like all sorts of weird people into BDSM and furries and things like that. And which is whatever, like furries and BDSM, do your own thing. But what does that have to do with vampirism? And then now psychic vampirism as a cultural term for the spiritual practice is intertwined with people that are just fans of vampire pop culture, goth subculture, and BDSM, and what we are. So I use the term Varmir as just like to cut the wheat from the chaff and just be like, just the one thing here, mate. I don't want the hot topic clothing and the raunchy sex and the Twilight fan fiction. I'm good. I'd also like to address something. One reason why I really don't like vampire pop culture, despite loving it, but if anything, ironically, given what I know, this is an interesting thing. During the witch burnings, there were major werewolf vampire cults, which, again, as a spiritual practice, an ancient Paleolithic European practice, it was the vampire and the werewolf were supposed to be the same creature. And there's so many explanations and background things that I might get into on this channel, but not in this video. Point is, these were practices that were practiced by chieftains, leaders of the tribes, and aristocracy, and eventually just kings and people like that. And while they were burning all the grimoires and burning people at the stake, the people actually that were Christian, that were in power, overseeing a lot of witch hunts and things like that, were actually practicing the elite version of European indigenous practice. And it started to mutate with the secrecy and inbreeding to keep their blood pure, and rubbing soldiers' shoulders with really bad organizations, the Illuminates amongst others that I won't get into, and somehow the Illuminati is the least worst of them. But I had an associate that was in the Order of St. George that told me a few things about this. And I also, unfortunately, I was investigating some of the North American dispatches of this cult and came across a video that I shouldn't have came across of a Mesoamerican werewolf vampire cult where they were cutting out the still beating heart of a young like Guatemalan kid, and that traumatized me. And I'm not sure if you've ever seen the depiction of the two naked dudes from Dante's Inferno, where the guy's biting the guy's neck. These European werewolf vampire cults use a lot of the times in their temples alternate depictions of that famous scene for their religion. And some of the most popular surviving ones that are secret are the werewolf vampire cults descended from Apollyon practice and the worship of Odin, and other ones involving Celtic gods in France. And there's a few others that I probably don't even know about, nor do I care. And then there's a Romanian one I'd rather not get into because it's that one I actually really fucking hate and want destroyed. The other ones I'm like I can't condemn it just because like it is a part of our ancient European past, but they're also psychopaths, but also they're not as bad compared to if you actually knew what I knew, you go, oh, well, they're doing some illegal, fucked up shit. People are definitely disappearing. Innocent people, women and children are being hurt, but also like small fry. And it's awkward because they are safeguarding an ancient European tradition that was on the verge of extinction. So I'm very in a neutral position, because on one hand it's like if I could learn those secrets, absolutely, but on the other hand I'm like they're kind of the enemy. Um, but yeah, no, they are. It's a weird subject for me, but I'm generally against them. But the thing is, these people, especially into secularization, where they didn't really have to worry about these types of forms of witch burnings and prosecution and being on the hunt or being hunted. These people, now that all they had to worry about was their privacy, and they had hundreds of generations of generational wealth and owned all these businesses, especially through taxes. Them being monarchs and people like that. They're very rich. Very, very rich, and they're still some of the most wealthiest families in Europe to this day. Um, but yeah, yeah. How do I put this? The amount, and this is part of the reason why I respect them in a weird way, because the gaslighting, I don't like gaslighting. I don't like manipulation, but what they did, the sheer absurd scale of it, it's hard for me not to be impressed. Where I'm just like in this awkward position where I'm like, that's kind of fucking awesome, but like that's genius. Like that's pure fucking genius. But basically, how do I put this? Um, these people had influenced the development of literature like Varney the Vampire, or Camilla or Carmilla or whatever, and Bram Stoker's Dracula. A big old psyop where it would start off as this bit of gothic horror, and over time the literature would become so much more absurd. And then when films were invented, like Nosferatu, eventually the goal was to basically separate the image of the vampire and the werewolf into two subsections, and to culturally, in the subconscious, separate them on opposite ends, and then to basically pump out Hollywood films making the vampire seem emo and gay, and the werewolf all hairy and bestial and whatever, and then to have it diluted into romance, teen drama, cosmic horror, and just to be so overplayed and so overly saturated in the human collective unconscious, to where the idea is just so fucking, we're sick of it, that the moment anything coming close, like we'll believe in any conspiracy theory, flat earth, the moon landing being faked, JFK assassinate, everything. But then when it genuinely comes down to a conspiracy theory that there's an actual werewolf vampire cult ran by the most powerful elites, everyone's like, flat earth, man, flat earth. But it's basically to make the population so exhausted by the idea. And then, so you're telling me, right, that not only are the vampires from Edward and Twilight real, and vampires like Edward from Twilight and Dracula, and and then there's actual werewolves like from Teen Wolf or the Vampire Diaries, or Guillermo del Toro's The Wolfman. You're telling me these two are real and they're one creature? And and then also that there are some of the most wealthiest, influential people in the world with ancient family ties that have been involved in so many socio-political, economic events that have defined Western civilization and its legacy, that they genuinely believe that they are vampires and werewolves, hybrids, like Underworld. Um, yeah, it's fucking beautiful. Like I'm not mad at it. It's genuinely an impressive feat of social engineering that it just makes me soak my panties. I'm just like, I mean, fucking fedora tip. Like how, like I get it. They do horrible things, absolutely awful, go against everything I stand for. But come on, that's like that's like I can appreciate a good thing for what it is. That's impressive. It's like you might go, oh well, bombing a village in the Middle East is terrible. Yeah, but like, have you seen this new model of drone cluster bombs? Like, I mean, think about the amount of money Lockheed Martin put into this. Like, that's genuinely like, whoo, and just the way it just, whew, yeah, man. But yeah, so again, it's probably a moral failing on my part, but it's interesting because when there are people that expose them, these people don't have to assassinate these journalists, independent people that try to expose genuine war crimes like manhunts. Is the European werewolf vampire cults. They'll do these things that I know 4chan has been talking about for years, where they'll kidnap some poor fools and pull a Hunger Games moment where they'll go off in the middle of the wilderness. All the hunting people will participate in an old European ritual called the Wild Hunt, and they'll shoot flares in the air, and then people will just, the waked up people will go, oh, and they'll hunt them. And when park rangers go to where they saw the flares, as they think someone needs rescuing, there's bullet casings and blood everywhere and no one to be found. Um, the Wild Hunt's definitely an interesting one for me, but and there are dispatches of them that do this in North America. They probably travel here for the summer to have some good fun, some good tomfoolery, my good shot. But yeah, um, and yeah, I mean they definitely they cannibalize on people. And the thing is, like the mist from the coffin relates more to alchemy. It's basically they're and as a vampire, I can do this too. It's pretty interesting where you sleep in a sarcophagus of some kind or a box and you inhale rotting flesh. And it's very efficient if you're feeding in the astral realm, especially on the unawakened or astral animals, where you inhale rotting flesh. And like the alchemist that dies in the flask and their essence disappears out of it like a mist to gain spiritual immortality. Basically, they sleep in the coffin and do a breathing technique to make their heart go catatonic and only beat a couple of times per minute. And they're almost dead. Their body heat lowers. Their body looks like a corpse. It's cold. And sometimes they'll put rotting flesh in the coffin with them. I do this personally. But it's basically so they can, when they go into the astral, they're really there, and it makes feeding on prey so much more efficient. And when they actually participate in taboos, where they actually eat human flesh, where they drink blood non-consensually, and sometimes probably from children and women, that's where I draw the line. Absolutely fucking not. But when they do this, it's not to say I am a literal mutated physical non-human creature. It's more to say I am a spiritual vampire, and I am doing this because as above so below, as the world I see it here is so below, or so it is so below, to say spiritually I'm a vampire through and through, and physically I've completed this cycle. I don't really see the need to do that because it's like, well, they're sympathetic vampires, so there's, they do it because of power and ambition, and it's a worldview. It's a hobby for them, whereas for me, it's just a matter of just existing day to day. So I don't really see the need to do that. It's like I'm gonna live as a vampire today, tomorrow, and when I die, and then I'm just gonna be born from some woman and start it all over again with a new personality, a new brain, and I'm going to exist and enjoy myself and feed like I always have for the past 100 million years. So I don't understand that part. Sympathetic vampire cultures and groups confuse me. But I digress. I don't engage in try to Like, I use the vampire in pop culture and mythology as a metaphor for what we are spiritually, but that's where I kind of draw the line, because by embracing vampire subculture, I would actually be promoting pedophilia. I would become what I'm accused of. I would be promoting cannibalism. I would be promoting human trafficking. I would be condoning flat out murder, because the lie in which all of this literature and pop culture is based off of is to hide what these people in the ancient old order or old world vampire werewolf cults do, right? I know I can't stop them, but I'm just like, so if I engage in it, if I participate and try to be like, yeah, maybe I'm gonna get fangs, right? Maybe I'm gonna, dress a little more emo, right? I only want to get a better coffin setup to sleep in for my spiritual practice. It has nothing to do with like trying to be edgy or whatever. It's more tied to what I am spiritually. Um, but yeah, no, I don't want to dress up all black and have mascara and black nails, and like, to partake in that is to partake into one of the greatest psyops in all of Western civilization. And again, as impressive as it is, I don't actually want to condone human trafficking. I don't want to condone child sacrifice. I don't want to condone any of that. Sure, I might admire the ancient indigenous nature of it. I might be impressed by the social engineering, but I don't want to participate. I don't want that kind of blood on my hands. So when people are like, why don't you kind of lean into it? If you're spiritually like this, why not be a part of a culture where you can express yourself and get longer fake nails and things like that? And it's like, because spiritually, if you saw what I looked like, you would piss yourself. And so I'm already secure in my spiritual existence, that I have nothing to prove. Why am I going to embrace Fang Fag culture? And what is Fang Fag? Why do I keep calling Father Sebastian Fang Fag Sebastian? Well, this is a further complaint I have. The amount of harassment we get for being astral vampires, Marmir, psychic vampires, the amount of bullying, the amount of people that just want us to die, the amount of spiritualist right hand path people, all these people that have videos online being like, this is how you banish them from your life, this is why they're evil, why they methods you can use to cast them out of your life, methods you can use to hurt them, why they want to hurt you. So instead of asking questions, shoot first, ask questions later, and kill them before they kill you, right? Just things like that. And there are people that are so ruthlessly just psychologically tortured over the situation, where they're called a monster despite being an average everyday person, to the point to where they kind of lean into it. It's like, well, I tried to be civilized, I tried to be a reasonable human being, and now you just pissed me off. So you know what? I'm going to become the monster. You want to call me a monster, a piece of shit, inhuman, whatever? And then they get the widow's peak or whatever, and get and then they wear the makeup. They literally get their physical canines modified to get extra pointy, which fucks up their ability to eat. Do you guys get tooth infections? Like, how does that work? That seems just so wrong. I like my primate incisors. They're fine the way they are. And then they get like black nails, and they're like, you know what? You called me a predator and a monster for so long. I'm gonna become that. And then you see in their head, they're thinking, well, they called me this terrifying thing, so now I'm just going to play the part and be their monster. And it's like, no, you look like you suck dick. I mean, and not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I'm just saying you're going to go through the park at night thinking, I'm going to be such a spooky creature. And then someone's going to come across you and be like, oh, are you on Grindr too? Oh, it's always nice to meet a fellow cruiser. I'm just, and then when you try to, people start to take it seriously, people that aren't your enemies, they're not going to take it seriously. They're going to look at you and be like, yeah, these people are fucking mentally ill. Yeah, so it's why a lot of actual, people that embrace what they are in terms of vampirism. I'm not the first, and I won't be the last to call people like Father Sebastian, Fang Fag Sebastian. Again, not exactly an attack on gays so much as it is just an insulting that man for being just, making us look horrible, making us look pathetic. I hate that man so much. Again, it's weird with Michelle Bellinger. Yeah, it's like, okay, so there is a ruthless amount of bullying, a ruthless amount of assaults, potential life-ending events. I've had to be put through such things, which I'll never get over. And how do I put this? Because it's so strange to me. It's so how do I put this? Um, to her credit, she has saved a lot of us, the younger ones, the children, psychic vampire children or vampire children. She's done a lot of good for us, so I'll give credit where credit's due. I'm not going to call her a fag, but or fang fag rather. But yeah, the amount of moral lecturing where she's apparently very self conscious of how the cattle view us, and I say cattle because again, that's my protest. If you call me a monster, a parasite, a predator for so long, unless I know you and you've proven yourself to be very courteous and reasonable, I'm just going to call you cattle. But it's not out of hatred because, again, I mean, do you fucking look at a cow and go, ugh, cattle, fucking piece of shit? No, you eat your steak and you move on. You're not even thinking about it, right? There's a detachment to it, and it's just kind of my way of being like, I don't want to dress like a retard, but I also don't want to take shit from people, so I'm just going to call them cattle. Or more accurately, elemental vampires or vampires. And again, that elemental vampirism. We'll get into that. But yeah, no, it's she just Michelle Bellinger seems very self-conscious. So throughout the entire codex, it's just moral lectures before she even teaches you anything useful. It's like, consent, consent, consent. Stay sane and consensual. Consent. Don't be a piece of shit. Don't be a monster like they say you are. And it's like she has this. Can you just assume that your own kind are decent enough at base level to make their own moral decisions and just give us useful information to make our lives less shit? That would be very useful, but no. Instead, you have to get the only way to get reasonable information is from people that are not astral vampires or vampires, like D.H. Thorne, again, one of the best people, or Antarantu by Michael W. Ford, Typhonian vampire magic. Just there's these people that are not of our kind tend to embrace it themselves and become sympathetic vamps. They produce more useful information, and it's really weird because when I really want to find information about vampirism, you have these good middle grounds, but then there's also weird extremes where you have Michelle and her ethics dumping, and then you have like the very far end where people are unironically Sith lords, very Machiavellian, and there's like Codex Archomo, we'll call it, by what is his name, Michael Fleming, the pedophile and member of the Order of the Nine Angles, that horrible piece of shit that is now released from prison, unfortunately. I hope someone stabs him in the neck, which is not a threat. Don't go, oh, I'm going to take this video down because he said I hope. No, saying I will stab someone in the neck is a threat. Saying I hope they get stabbed in the neck is wishful thinking. It's prayer. So I'm essentially praying over video of my intent. If someone prays for someone to get sick from the flu, is it legally liable in court that their flu was cured by prayer? No. But in some places, it might be legally liable to say, well, I wish they got stabbed in the neck. So if they do get stabbed in the neck, you could be legally liable. And it's like, yeah, I hope, not I will. I hope someone else will. Oh, I hate that man so much. And he's just my beautiful, beautiful ancestral homeland. He stains it with his existence. England. I hope someone, come on, English people, do your job. Bring back nobility. Just get all King Arthur mode and take care of him. He's like Mordred. Fleming is like Mordred. Terrible. Anyways, but yeah, it's so weird because again, there is useful sympathetic vampire information, but it's just like for the longest time it felt like I had to pick between Michelle and then someone that's like the only way to be a vampire is to actually like rape and murder and cannibalize people, in that order, which is, you know, and I have his book somewhere. I couldn't find it. I might have thrown it away actually. But it's actually useful. And I'm like, but why? I'm reading it and I'm like, this is actually one of the most useful bits of information I've ever read on the subject. And it is the most evil, sinister, fucked up thing I've ever read. What is wrong with you people? And it's like, the more authentic the information on vampirism becomes, the more unnecessary these people are with their illegal, literal domestic terrorist types of things. And I'm just like, that can exist outside of that. And more often than not, it does. But it's the irony that the most knowledgeable people, and I'm grateful that they're sympathetic vampires, because that makes me feel so much better about being what I am. I'm just like, very good. But yeah, what is astral vampirism, or psychic vampirism, or Varmirism? So I'm just going to use my term, Varmir, as a subsect of astral vampire, because that's its own kind of thing. Varmir, whereas astral vampire could be interpreted in so many different ways. Kati. Let's start with what we are. So again, I'll be kind of projecting my own cosmology, a little bit of Vampire Codex as a source of reference, but I have my own spiritual beliefs to kind of help make sense of a lot of it. I believe, first of all, we're all a part of one God, one source. And I kind of believe that out of the source is like the light in the yin, or the yang, and I don't even remember that Japanese symbol, that Yggdrasil, the world tree, is that light in the darkness, and that it draws upon the light of Brahman, the monad, and that basically God is this eternal, perpetual force that I call, by metaphor, the undivided sun, because the sun, if it gives you cancer, it's not because the sun hates you. If it causes drought, it's not because it wants suffering. If it creates life, if it gives you vitamin D, it's not because it loves you. And if it preserves both, it's because that's its nature. It's the sun. So I believe in this one ultimate, omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient God that is innocent, that is unknowing, but knows all, that has no plan. I believe morality is a biological construct and free will is bullshit, and our genes dictate our decisions, and that can go in an entirely different thing that's not acceptable on YouTube. But yeah, so we'll not go there. We'll not go there. But yeah, no, I think God is just everywhere, and again, I don't want to get into my theology on pantheism, but I believe we're all a part of God. And the universalist, I guess I will get into it. The universalist, I don't really like. I know a good universalist, sort of, that's a liberal, that's very popular and will probably always have more subscribers than me. Very good man that I owe a little bit of money to. A lot. I'm going to pay you back, I swear. Yeah, but basically, universalist will. And I'm not saying this is what he believes. He's the exception because he's not retarded about it. But I'm more of a right wing perennialist, traditionalist, and basically I've heard this Christian argument where, oh, so you believe God is one and God is all, and there's a guy called Athelma Studios that made this argument where basically he says, okay, so since everything's God, that pedophile that hurts kids is God. So, you know, he's equally as divine as everyone else, so that his act is sacred. You know, I've heard people say, well, you know, that person that fucks dogs, you know, he's if we're all part of the same God, that's great. And I'm like, yeah, it's a weird type of polarization where you have Zoroastrian dualism projected through Western right hand path spirituality, this good versus evil, and then you have postmodernist materialist that try to disconnect themselves from this, and they create a mindset of equality over quality, where they believe in this type of monism where everything is one, we're all equal. Since we're all part of the same thing, we're all made of the same atoms and the same stardust, we're in this life together. Whereas I might be a little more uh, Dr. Pierce about it with his cosmotheism, um, where basically it's like, yeah, we're all brothers and sisters, just as we are to cancer, cockroaches, fungus, maggots, sure. But we're different, right? And the way I'd approach it with right wing pantheism is that God is the instrument, and there are bad songs and good songs. And you'd have to be a fucking imbecile to compare Richard Wagner's, the Valkyrie song with Taylor Swift's music. There is reality is the frequencies, the rhythm, the lyrics, the melody, the harmony of this music. The instrument itself is not at fault, but there are bad songs and there are good songs. It's a dynamic reality, and I believe in not dualism but distinctionism. There are distinctions. Lead and gold might ultimately be part of the same thing, but gold is gold and lead is lead. And there are some species that are better than other species. Some creatures within said species that are better than its other counterparts. You know, and if we look at nature, if you try to say, oh, well, I worship nature and I believe in a pantheistic reality where God is everything, we're all part of nature, so we're all equal. I'm like, okay, that's a good starting point. You almost have it. So look at nature. What do you see? You see an elk that is protecting its fawn, and it impales a wolf with its antlers because it prioritizes its own children, its own fawn, over wolf pups. And now that the parent's dead, the wolf pup starves to death in its den. Or on the other hand, the wolves are sickly, malnourished, and don't have the strength to kill the buck or the elk or whatever. And the elk isn't paying attention to its fawn, so the wolves go in and they swipe the fawn, they eat it, and they give a good portion to the pups, and the pups live. You know, you see crocodiles just dragging things into the river. You see sharks just chopping fish in half. You know, and you see hunger, you see entropy, you see the will. Where's my book on Schopenhauer? I have a tattoo of Arthur Schopenhauer, by the way. I believe in everything he believes about the world, except he's like, you can't justify it. So become anti-natalist, become an ascetic, because it's all evil, right? The 98% of egregious suffering does not justify like the 2% good. He didn't say that, but that's essentially what his philosophy is. And I'm like, yeah, I agree with his approach to the world, but I acknowledge that he did it from a weak point of view, where basically he acknowledged reality as how do I put it, something that we should opt out of, or gave us a way of life for if we were to participate in it, how we can ease the suffering. But that you can't justify it. You can't say that this is a divine plan, that this is a good thing. And I'd say that he's right about almost everything except for maybe women. And basically, he's right, but he's weak. He is weak, so he can't stand the burden. Whereas the strong, people have said to me, so you won't really want to bring kids into this world with the amount of rape, the amount of murder, the amount of serial killers, the amount of cancer, the amount of civil wars, the amount of village bombings, terrorists, and all these horrible things, taxes. Oh, you dumb animal, I love you. And all these things. How can you justify it? I'm like, no, you're absolutely right. But also, I'm strong, and my children will be strong. So yes, if I had the choice to end all suffering and all forms of bodily harm and starvation and plague, or not, I would simply allow that to continue to exist and have everyone in the world suffer, so that me and my children could have the privilege of looking at Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night, so that I can read Alfred Tennyson's poetry. Because to the strong, suffering is wonderful. Suffering is a gift. Participation in reality is a beautiful thing. And yes, it's all horrible. But man, that little flicker of it, that little grain of sand is fucking awesome. Hold on, this cat, I need to get her off my shelf. But yeah, no, I can justify the selfishness because, and I remember Schopenhauer said something like, to acknowledge all of that and then say that you want to continue the cycle and bring other people into this world makes you evil, sinister, whatever. And I'm like, oh, absolutely. But the thing is, I love that mentality. I encourage Schopenhauer's philosophy because those that buy into it, you can tell that they're not worthy, right? People that are like, oh, it's so over. I don't want to have kids. I just want to end it all. Well, the chances are your attitude will be passed on to your children. And either through you raising them to be like you or them just being born with your nature, they will not be able to ever appreciate the sheer beauty and magnitude of eternity. Whereas mine will. They'll step into the suffering and the shit and go, look at all the suffering. This is a chance to draw a line in the sand and say, I'm going to be stronger than the weakness around me and enjoy myself at the expense of everyone's suffering. So the thing is, yes, I encourage antinatalism because those that don't want to have kids, they're not going to have kids that will resent living. Whereas those that ignore antinatalism, when they have kids, they'll have kids that embrace living. It balances it out. And to me, that's nature worship. Like COVID, right? I was always against COVID, the whole wearing masks things. Now, I believe in vaccines. I believe that the COVID vaccine stops the spread of it. I believe that wearing masks can help prevent the spread. And that ideally, if you're concerned with that, then sure. And I've had friends that have died from it, and people have stopped talking to me over this very opinion. But I refuse to wear masks and get the vaccine because I want people to die of COVID. Because viruses are nature's way of saying, hey, there is this entire population that's destroying the earth, and you're out of equilibrium with the environment. Everyone in the food chain has a predator, everyone has prey, but you're outside of it. You came from nature and you've lived in your civilization and you attribute your civilization to God, even though you come from the primordial womb and you spit on your mother. So